Good evening. This is the call to the order of the Wednesday, November the 6th Policy Committee meeting at 5:30. Mrs. Shope, could I get a roll call order, please? Roll call, please.
Yes. Tom Hankins,
Here.
Amy Levy,
Here.
Brian Nichols.
Here.
All members of the committee are present.
Thank you. Could I get approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second? I'll second. Discussion, Board Member Levy.
Thank you so much. So I have a few items I just wanted to follow up on. My first question is there a reason we're not reviewing policy in number sets?
Yes, we just discussed that at the last meeting. I don't see that always is necessary. So here we are.
Okay, awesome. Next question. At the October 2nd policy meeting, as reflected in the minutes, Chair Nichols, you stated that the decision to leave policy 672.1, purchasing/bidding requirements, on the agenda, and then move the rest of that set forward to the November meeting, which was against the directive of the board, but that's neither here nor there. So I'm just wondering why those policies don't appear on this evening's agenda, because that motion was unanimously approved.
Thank you. Yes, those will be on the December meeting.
So
So this is the agenda. So we're not going to get into a long discussion about what's not on the agenda. This is it, and the other items will be on future agendas.
Well, here's the thing. I have the right to ask questions about the agenda. That's what the discussion on the agenda is for. So my more specific question is, it was a motion that was unanimously approved by this committee. You even voted for it. So I'm unclear why you unilaterally decided that it wouldn't appear on the November agenda as we all agreed to, but you've decided to move it to December. So if you could give me kind of the thought process behind that, I'd appreciate it.
I felt better moving it to December.
Okay, so I just want to express my concern that the committee took a position unanimously and that was overruled. My final question is also at the October meeting. I made the motion to postpone the review of policy 345.6, graduation requirements, and rules 1 through 3 to the November 6th meeting. And then that also was voted on. It was passed unanimously, and that also does not appear on this agenda. So I'm wondering, is it the same thing? You just decided to overrule the will of the committee?
No, I have forwarded that to the TLE committee for discussion there before coming back.
So actually, that would be a yes, because again, the motion was to postpone the review into the November 6th committee, which you even voted for. So I just wanted to be clear and have that recognized in the minutes that you made the decision to overrule the will of the committee.
Thank you, Board Member Levy.
You're welcome.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays?
Nay.
Motion passes 2-1. Could I get approval of the minutes, item D, approval of the minutes for October the 2nd?
So moved.
Is there a second? I'll second. Any discussion? Board Member Levy.
Thank you so much. Ms. Shope, if we could go to item 4, that second paragraph, which starts with move to request administration send policy 445 to legal for vetting. I think it would be more clear if we adjusted that to say Send policy 445 to legal for vetting, and include students' rights with respect to searches. And then go on to then bring the policy back to the policy committee. Did you need me to repeat anything? It's the second paragraph after number 4, so that what I am recommending is that entire sentence would read, move to request administration to send policy 445 to legal for vetting and include students' rights with respect to searches, and then pick back up with then bring the policy back. Okay, so unless anyone objects, since there's already a motion and a second, I would like to move to amend the minutes from the policy minutes from October 2nd, as we just discussed. Are you going to call for a second?
Is there a second? Hearing none, the amendment failed. So, all those in favor?
We need discussion on the main motion.
Discussion on the main motion. Board Member Levy?
Thank you so much. Just a question to my colleagues. This was a motion that I made, and so I just wanted the language to accurately reflect what I requested, and I'm just wondering why there's opposition to make sure our minutes are accurate.
Mrs. Shope, did you took the notes, so you typed the notes based on the information you were given, is that correct?
Yes. However, for me, it's just a language cleanup based on what I typed versus, I mean, it's just a few words to change around to make it flow a little better. I don't have any objection to the revision in terms of what I typed versus what she's asking to be changed, because it's not really changing the intent of what I typed, if that makes sense.
So if I may, the question that I'm posing to my colleagues on the board is, I'm unclear why there's an objection to making sure that our minutes accurately reflect the intention of what we discussed. And what I mean by that specifically is why the motion did not receive a second. So if I could get feedback from my colleagues, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Board Member Hankins, do you have a
Yeah, and Mrs. Levy, you've been very efficient in telling us before when you've had a problem with the language of the misinterpretation of the board meeting minutes. When you presented this item, I was thinking you were trying to change the flavor or the intent of the language, and I was kind of lost. But having said that, I personally would prefer that when you bring these types of notices or objections, not objections, but amendments to it, I enjoy when you do say, because of the language doesn't reflect what should be in the minutes. To me, it brings a whole different perspective as to, I'm looking for what's the difference between what you said and what is on the paper. And I know we're not looking at Mrs. Shope for any discernation, but I just would appreciate when any board member brings these things forward that we do say we're just cleaning up the language in the minutes that are represented. Thank you.
Thank you for that feedback. I assume that was obvious, but thank you for the feedback.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays?
Nay.
Motion passed 2-1. Item 1E, approval of minutes, October the 14th. Is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Is there a second? I'll second. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any nays? Motion carries 2-0.
You need to ask for abstentions.
Abstentions in the voting policy only occur when there's a conflict of interest.
I can abstain because I didn't participate in the meeting. Therefore, it would be nonsensical for me to approve the minutes. So I'm abstaining.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, moving on to policies review. 2A is 445 student interviews. Is there a motion to approve?
Before there's a motion, are you opposed? According to Robert's rules, we can have.
Board Member Levy, I did not acknowledge you.
Oh, please forgive me. Let me put my hand up on the screen.
Board Member Levy.
Thank you so much for turning your mic on so I could hear you. According to Robert's rules, we are a small board, which is under 12, so it's perfectly reasonable for us to have discussion before we arrive at a motion. And I think that could streamline the meeting, because then if there is a change, then we don't have to go back and offer an amendment and then vote on that and then go back to the main motion. So I would appreciate if we would consider having discussion on the policy and then arriving at a motion.
Thank you. So again, is there a motion to approve 445 student interviews?
I would just like to see this wheel turn a little bit, and if Mrs. Levy wants to have a little discussion beforehand, I don't see the gist in doing that prior to the motion.
Okay.
Unless we do it, I know we're going to have discussion either way, but if Board Member Levy sees something that she wants to address prior to the motion, I'm okay with that.
Okay. That's the will of the committee. Board Member Levy.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Board Member Hankins, for that generous concession to allow us to have discussion before the motion is made. I just have a quick question on the second page, the first paragraph in green. It starts with the building principal or designee may be present during a student interview. And I'm just wondering, is there a reason that that's not shall be present? If the administration could provide insight on that, that would be helpful.
Sure, thank you. Sorry, Mrs. Levy. Is it okay if I go ahead, Mr. Nichols?
Yes, go ahead, Dr. Garrison.
No problem. So yes, Mrs. Levy, it's not necessarily a reason why we changed it from shall to may. We would typically have an administrator present in some of these situations, unless law enforcement or something like that is requesting different opportunities in that situation, in the specific situation. But that could be changed to shall to may. That's not a problem with the administration.
Yes.
Thank you so much. So I don't want us to paint ourselves into a corner, because if we do say shall, and we could put language in there unless there is objection by law enforcement or child protective services. I can't imagine why that would be the case, but you can't think of every possibility. Or would you be more comfortable with every effort will be made? That just seems like the intention is to have an administrator who hopefully is familiar with our students, is present in the room if a parent or guardian cannot be present.
Yeah, I'm fine with that as well. I mean, that's always our hopes, is to have that type of relationship with the situation.
Okay.
So,
So what I would recommend that be edited to is every effort will be made to have a building principal or designee present during the student interview. And then if we could add language, and I'll repeat this, Ms. Shope, unless law enforcement or child protective services has a reason to object. So unless my colleagues are not comfortable with that language.
Could you say that again? Repeat that, please. Thank you.
Absolutely. Every effort will be made to have a building principal or designee present during a student interview unless law enforcement or child protective services has an objection. And just wanted to note finally, I'm assuming that language at the bottom is a result of my request of having that vetted by legal and to include language about students' rights. So I really appreciate that addition at the bottom. So thank you to the administration.
no problem.
May I ask a point of clarification?
Yes.
Are we also keeping the language unless the student or their parent or guardian requests otherwise as well in that sentence?
Yeah, I was just asking the add,
Okay.
not excluding. Thank you
Okay.
so much for clarifying.
Okay, thank you, Board Member Levy. Any other, Dr. Garrison, thank you. Any other discussion? Mr. Hankins, Board Member Hankins.
Oh, yeah, going back to the said sentence that we're talking about, the building principal or designee may, shall, will, to me, they all leave a little wiggle room for something not happening. I'm not sure if Mrs. Levy, and I'm just asking, is the intent, I know the intent is we will do everything possible to do it, but it does leave wiggle room, and I'm not sure if that's the maybe, will be, still leaves wiggle room that may be present or maybe not be present. So I don't know if that's a reason to tighten it up, or are we looking to just leave it open in case something for a variable that we're not thinking of?
Is it okay if I respond?
Yes, that's what I'm asking
Oh,
you.
well, I was just
No,
asking the chair.
Absolutely, yep, absolutely.
Thank you so much. I got called out for not having my hand raised, so I just wanted to make sure I was good before I responded. So, and again, we can't account for every possibility, but I think it is reasonable if there is an emergency and law enforcement or child protective services needs to access one of our students, and let's say there's an issue or a concern in the building where the building principal is tied up and not able to select a designee to go do that, then that halts the process if policy is being followed. So that's why I put every effort will be made, and I trust the judgment of the leadership in the buildings that they'll follow through on that. So that was why I suggested that wording.
And I agree with that. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree too. I think that's good change in wording. That'll cover us a little closer, I think. Mrs. Shope, did you get that change?
I did.
Okay.
But it feels clunky, sorry, in the fact that we're going to be saying unless law enforcement or child protective services requests otherwise, unless the student, parent, or guardian requests otherwise. So I just didn't know if we could somehow put that together a little bit. Does that make sense?
Is it okay if I respond?
Yes.
Thank you so much. I would be fine with combining those. So unless law enforcement, child protective services, a parent or guardian request otherwise, if everyone else is okay with that. To just kind of, yeah.
I think that sounds good. Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Shopman. Thank you, Board Member Levy. So, okay, any further discussion?
Yes, just one quick point, Mr. Nichols. Typically, the board has given us the authority to, make small changes so that things read clear. Like, sometimes an and is needed or if then is needed type of thing. And so I just want to make sure that, the board knows that Michelle and I, of course, we look at how things are written. And then if there's a need to, clean up the language without changing the integrity of what was stated in the board meeting, we have done that before. And so I just want to make sure we're all aware of that moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Garrison. So are you comfortable with this, moving this forward with with those changes to the language?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
No problem.
Okay. So, could I get a motion to approve 445 student interviews with the amended wording that Board Member Levy has given and Mrs. Shope has a record of?
I move approval of policy 445 to the full board for a first reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any more discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Motion carried, 3-0. Okay, moving forward, item 2B, policy 662.2, Community Program and Services Fund 80. So I will open up that for discussion. Board Member Levy?
Thank you. I just wanted to get clarification on 2 points. The first is the third paragraph, so right under those 3 bullet points, when it speaks to the timing, and I just wanted to make sure, Mr. Chady, is the spirit of that if something is assigned to Fund 80, that unless there's a change, the understanding is that is where it will continue to remain. And then if any, what I took from it is if it's something that needs to be changed after the board has adopted the budget, then that would come back to the board if it's something that's new after the budget has been adopted.
I would say that's kind of how I read it. Speaking to the third paragraph there, I might actually suggest that a portion of a sentence be removed there because I don't think it's necessary, but I'm equally as okay with it staying, to be honest.
Mr. Chady, which portion are you suggesting?
In the highlighted section after the transfer to Fund 80, and I'll just quote, through the inclusion of the program in the annual budget adoption or at such other times permitted under state law. I think that's just unnecessary verbiage because that's the guidance, that's the regulations, that's what we have to follow from the state anyway. So oftentimes I think in policy we refer to state statutes or to administrative code that already exists. And I'm not sure that it's then necessary to codify it into our policies. a great example would be, we've got employees that drive district vehicles, but I don't know that we have anything in policy that says they can't go over 25 miles an hour. So, I mean, it's kind of underwritten, right? Follow the speed limit.
True, but if they get caught, they'll get a ticket that we will pay.
Right. But, again, we seem to be putting more and more into policy. And as a former school board member in a different district, and I understand the differences, I was always taught less is more, not more is more.
But as you said earlier, otherwise, but you also wouldn't have a problem if it stayed, correct?
I would not, because again, it's what we have to follow anyway.
Okay.
But if we're going to do that, then there's a lot of other things that we can build into the policy too that are required in state statutes or in administrative code.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion? Mr. Hankins, do you have any discussion?
Just, for example, the part I'm looking at is shall be reviewed by the district's auditing firm. So let's just say we put something into Fund 80 that maybe we shouldn't have or it's not supposed to be there. Does this kind of protect us from doing anything out of order? I'm not sure when that happens.
So the review of any Fund 80 expenditures is
Yes.
a DPI requirement of auditors to review annually with every school district that has a Fund 80.
So it's an annual review and,
It's a requirement.
right. Well, let's just say we did something that wasn't supposed to be in there. What would be once the auditors found it, then what? Let's say, just an example.
We would either be asked to make a change to the financial statements to remove it out of Fund 80, or we could leave it there, and then the DPI would review it as part of the audit findings. And if they determine the expense to be ineligible, then we would have a penalty in our revenue limit in the following year.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Board Member Levy?
Thank you. I just had a question in the now fourth paragraph, that number 2. For those who hopefully are playing along at home, I'll read the header. It says the school board may not expend monies on eligible cost for community programs and services. The following are ineligible costs. And then number 2, cost for any program or service whose schedule presents a significant barrier for age-appropriate school district residents to participate in the program or service. Like in lay terms, what does that mean?
Is that a question to myself?
Yes, please.
Okay, sure. So essentially, it means that you can't provide programming or charge programming to Fund 80 that would be restrictive to the point where certain district residents would not be able to participate because of the time or the location, et cetera. So it's got to be offered in an open, the programming has to be offered and available to all interested people throughout the district.
Okay, and that's just respective of the timing in which it is offered.
Timing and perhaps location in, just to continue the conversation about that entire paragraph, that's all, quote, cut and pasted from DPI's Administrative Code 80.02 speaks to ineligible costs.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Dr. Garrison?
Yeah, I think in that second point to Mrs. Levy, the district has to do everything it possibly can to keep everything as neutral as possible in these types of programming. And that was my only statement. But Mr. Chady answered everything correctly. This is in statute.
Thank you, Dr. Garrison.
Can I offer a couple of other quick recommendations?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Just to point out in the first paragraph, there's a number of grammar or other corrections that I can work with Ms. Shope to connect on punctuation issues. let's see, must be paragraph 5, the top of page 2. There it directs the executive director of business services to do a function. I might suggest that that be changed to the district superintendent or designee. And I'm certainly very much aware that the designee may end up being me in some cases, or my role. But at the same token, I don't know that it's the executive director of business services responsibility to fulfill the rest of that paragraph for things that are administered in other departments.
Okay, so give me your wording again, the districts.
The district superintendent or designee shall have the primary administrative responsibility.
Shall have the prime, okay. Dr. Garrison, are you okay with that? Would you be okay with that modification?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think the following paragraph, speaking to the executive director of business services, ensuring that the district periodically conducts those things, is fine and appropriate. The last item in the middle of the legal, section 120.07 sub 6 no longer exists in state statutes, so we should remove that as well.
I'm sorry, 120.07,
Sub 6.
Sub 6,
Yeah, the
okay.
third one down.
okay,
Yeah.
okay. Mrs. Shope, did you get those? Okay, very good. Is there any further discussion? Member Hankins?
Yes, so Mr. Chady, during our budget, we talked about moving funds, putting some funds into Fund 80, so we're obviously in line with what we are changing this to meet. I mean, it meets all the qualifications of the expenditures out of Fund 80.
Yeah, for what the board has previously approved, we're fine. And again, I'm fine with these changes. These changes, honestly, these wording changes in the policy don't require us to change any of our administrative processes at all, because we have to follow this anyway, because it's part of state code or state statutes to begin with, so,
Thank you.
yep.
Any other discussion? Could I get a motion to approve 662.2 with the amendments that Mr. Chady just offered?
I move approval of policy 662.2 as amended to the full board for first reading.
I'll second.
Okay, there's a first and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye, motion carried. Policy 881, items 2C, policy 881-3, relations with organizations of faith. We'll open it up for discussion. Mr. Hankins?
Yes, I'm reviewing this policy. Was that admin driven, and what was the motivation behind it? And I'm not weighing in on whether it's right or wrong. I'm just saying, I understand it's being tightened up, and I agree with Mr. Chady that we need to, less verbiage is better. I'm just wondering what the motivation is to, or the difference between what is there and what is not there anymore, and why. I'm just asking. Why the need for the change?
Well, I actually think the wording pretty well speaks for itself. That the churches and religious organizations are important to any community, and including Beloit. And we actually have several faith-based organizations that are actually doing some work with some of the elementary schools and giving help to families and students. I think this clarifies that a little better. And so that's it.
Okay, thank you.
Board Member Levy.
Thank you so much. A couple questions. Mr. Hankins, thank you for bringing up that point. The question I don't believe has been answered yet is who authored these edits to the policy?
Yours truly.
Thank you so much. So what I would actually recommend is that we keep the policy as it is with the following minor change, and then I'll explain why. So that second sentence where it says the school system will make efforts to be flexible in allowing individuals to observe religious holidays when those holidays conflict with the school calendar. I think the more appropriate language would be when those holidays are not included on the school calendar. I don't, that just the connotation of conflict when we're speaking about people's religious beliefs. I just think that that would more appropriately reflect the new portion that you are proposing to add, which begins with the Board of Education recognizes that churches and religious organizations are an integral part of a healthy, diverse community. While I believe that personally for certain religious organizations, it would depend on the work of the organization, I am not comfortable with making that statement for our district because could be people that don't practice a religion or believe that that is accurate for them, and we represent everyone included in our district. And I just wanted to point out another reason why I think the current language with that minor edit that I recommended remains appropriate. While the phrase separation of church and state does not explicitly appear in the U.S. Constitution, the concept is enshrined in the First Amendment. In that first clause of the First Amendment, for anyone who doesn't have that memorized, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. So I think what currently exists is very much in line with the Constitution, including that First Amendment. And for those that don't have it in front of them, it's super brief, so I'll just read the first two sentences. Please note that the second sentence will include my proposed edit. The Board of Education recognizes the principles of freedom of religion and separation of church and state. The school system will make and I'm fine with change that to the school district, will make every effort to be flexible in allowing individuals to observe religious holidays not included on the school calendar. So I'm perfectly fine with keeping the language as is with that minor addition. And I would love to hear feedback from my colleagues.
Board Member Hankins.
I understand the whole. I think I do. I'm just trying to ask. Was there something that happened that we're trying to dodge a bullet from, or are we just housekeeping on this? Was there something that happened over the last couple of years that we need to tidy up on? I see the differences that's being proposed, but I'm just wondering the reasons. What do we want to? Board Chairman Nichols, what would you like this to say? Is what is what that you put forward? What in the last language? So all the stuff that was taken off. I'm being really naive here. I just don't see. I guess I'm talking in circles. Well, what would be the ultimate goal of if you could say what you want to say about religion in the schools? And I know we do have, to me, it goes back even more basic. What is religion? So I don't want to go way back to that point, but I'm trying to go along with what's going on. I just don't understand a lot of the differences between what Mrs. Levy is talking about and what is being proposed and what was on the books before, although I do understand where Mrs. Levy is coming with what she's saying. I don't want to get away from the flavor of what this policy is supposed to say. I guess that's my question. What is the flavor? What is the intent of the policy?
The intent of the policy, and Board Member Levy quoted the First Amendment, but I'll read it again. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. So I differ in my opinion of, I can quote literally probably thousands of people, if I knew all of them, but who continue to say, there's the term separation of church and state is not in the Constitution, and it is not the establishment of religion. Respecting an establishment of religion goes back, quite frankly, back to this country was started by the English, and they had a church, a national church, and that is why that is added to the Constitution, so that we would not have and we allow the free exercise thereof. So I believe in that spirit of this First Amendment, that this is more conducive to what the amendment says. Board Member Levy.
I appreciate you acknowledging me. I'm not sure if you saw Board Member Miller from the audience that would like to be acknowledged.
I was just here for the meeting break, but may I offer a thought?
Sure. Actually, as a board member, you need to, yeah, thank you.
Hey there. So thanks for acknowledging me. I appreciate it. So, okay, I love that we are adhering to the Constitution. It also talks about our freedom to practice and freedom from. And as somebody who is an active member of my faith community, which does not go to church, but rather attends synagogue, I'm just wondering if we could use broader terms, because faith community, regardless of how we define religion, is still protected by the First Amendment, right? It's freedom to practice and freedom from. So if somebody felt like, for example, the faith community included something that they didn't feel comfortable with, because I think you've expressed this before, concern about what constitutes religion, and I just heard Board Member Hankins bring that up as well. It actually doesn't matter what we define as religion. It matters what our Constitution says that we're, the rights that we're entitled to. So I will say that, again, I think we had a similar discussion about a policy like this before. If I'm out of sick days, and because I've got 3 kids, for example, and I would like to take time off in the spring to observe Passover with my synagogue, and I, asked to take unpaid time or whatever the situation is, right? If I don't go to a church, the way that this policy is written, and if we participate, for example, in the Hands of Faith, the homeless, participation, if all of these different community connections are really limited by the use of the word church. And I don't believe that it's your intention to be exclusionary. And I also want to respect where you're coming from. I don't know, though, that the faith community as vocabulary is exclusionary or introducing any kind of adverse unintended impact. I feel like by putting church in there, that I would read that, and as a parent in the district, and I'm not the only parent or of children in the district that are of a different faith that don't go to a place called church, who are people of faith, I find that extremely offensive. And I would ask that you please consider, maybe broadening that language to be inclusive and reflective of everybody in our community. Thanks.
Thank you, Board Member Miller. Any other discussion? So, okay. Board Member Levy?
Thank you so much. So I just wanted to clarify, because I wouldn't want you to feel the pressure of quoting 1,000 people. The way I started off was the phrase separation of church and state does not explicitly appear in the United States Constitution. You're absolutely correct. But the concept is enshrined in that First Amendment. And just to repeat the first clause, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. And so that's why I think the current language, it needs a little tweaking. Thank you for those important comments and that input, Board Member Miller. So if I am understanding your position correctly, the first sentence says, the Board of Education recognizes the principles of freedom of religion and separation of, it currently says church and state. Would you be more comfortable with religious practice and state, or do you have another suggestion for the language?
The Board of Education recognizes the principle of freedom of religion. That's what the Constitution says.
I was asking Board Member Miller a question. No, that's okay. So the first sentence, this is what it currently says. The Board of Education recognizes the principles of freedom of religion and separation, and again, it's the principles, not the exact verbiage. The principles of freedom of religion and separation of church and state. Religious practice and state? Oh, yeah.
Hey there. Yeah, I mean, I just think like, I don't know why we're naming out, I mean, church and state is like, that's like a legal term. That makes like total sense to me. I guess like what I'm seeing is as people like are, coming to the community or whatever, or those of us who exist in the community, we went from, I'm looking at all the crossed off language, and the only crossed off language that included a specific mention of a holiday or an institution of practice that aligns directly with a specific religion is just that one term, and then we're changing it to adding it's like churches and others, feels offensive. It feels like it's prioritizing. So I have zero issue with the original language where it says the Board of Education recognizes the principles of freedom of religion and separation of church and state. That's like a common term that's like embedded in like our American legal historical practice here. I think the hierarchy of like churches and others feels yucky to me, particularly as like instances of like anti-Semitic and Islamophobic, and I don't have like facts on me, right? I was like really here for the meet and greet, so I wasn't fully prepared for this, but that's a huge issue right now, and it's one that is like absolutely affecting me and other people of not just of my own faith, and I think that it's not landing well. I feel like we're not reading the room well. With what's going on right now in the world and the climate and contention, and it doesn't feel welcoming. It feels very exclusionary.
Thank you for that clarification. So it sounds like your concerns are in the proposed new language and not in the current language of the policy. All right, so to bring this home, I don't want to make assumptions, but I think you were kind of leaning, Board Member Hankins, to why is a change needed? And even though you didn't specifically ask that question, I'm going to go ahead and answer it for myself. I don't think a change is needed to this policy. I would just like to tweak the language so that we're not talking about holidays being in conflict with the school calendar, but just simply not included on the school calendar. But other than that, I am fine with the current language in the policy.
Board Member Hankins, do you have any other comments?
Well, I'd like to get your take on it, number one. But number two, you've eloquently told us that there is no division of church and state in the Constitution. And yes, it's in Article 1. Is that an assumption, or are we trying to get to say that we want a division between church and state, although it's a given?
Yes, the term separation of church and state has been an assumption that has been here probably since the Constitution was written. but it is not in the Constitution. So we're talking, we're talking a different
right.
thing. So
There is no division
and-
between church and state.
And then, but we're covering religious organizations. Freedom of religion is freedom of religion, period. And so,
And church,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I didn't mean, but church, going back to what Mrs. Miller said, doesn't mean physically church, just means a religion, church and state. Doesn't mean a physical building.
Yeah.
Is that correct?
Correct.
That's how I assume it.
Correct.
And that's, Mrs. Miller, I think, was kind of going that direction, right? That,
I don't know if I'm allowed to talk.
well, I don't know.
I can just come chill with you guys if you really want to, that's fine. Okay, so like, the term was coined in like the 19th century, the late 18th century, right? So that's why that's where the term comes from. So like today in 2024, on the subsequent lines where it talks about like churches and other organizations, that's, I guess, where I'm taking issue. You're probably, like, there's, like, we're going to name, I mean, why name one? And we just had, like, the whole logic behind the pronoun policy, right? Is like, why name all the things? Let's call it they. That's what's the accepted practice. Why not apply the same logic? Like, why risk at all, like, messaging something? And I'm telling you, as a person who is, like, a member of a community who is impacted by this, whose children attend the district, that this is not landing well. And I don't believe that there's any bad intention. And I love that we are taking time to make sure that we are being respectful and inclusive. This is, and I'm just telling you as an affected person, this is not, this does not feel good to have, like, one, and then we're just gonna, like, lump the rest together. That feels like we're prioritizing a faith, and that is different from a term that's been around for more than 100 years, which absolutely has logically assigned that term, right? So I guess, like, that's where I'm struggling. It's not like with the term separation of church and state, which we can argue about if we really want to, as being freedom to practice and freedom from, which is how my best understanding as a person, that's what the legal implication of that is. That's really not an issue because, like, that's beyond us to rule on, right? We're a publicly funded institution with an obligation to serve all of the families in our community. The School District of Beloit is the only school institution here that is constitutionally obligated by Article 10, Section 3 of the Wisconsin State Constitution to serve every child, which includes children of all faiths, children of families that are not of faith. So, like, why even, like, mess with the optics, right, of prioritizing one or the other, or, like, creating any kind of, like, possibility for division, right? So I guess that's where I'm coming from. Certainly, I'm not going to argue with, like, an age-old, like, legal term. Like, it is what it is, right? But, like, we have a choice right now about how we write the rest of that policy. So, I mean, you don't need to listen to me, but I'm just telling you, as a person who's, like, not a Christian, who is a person of faith, that doesn't feel good. And I know, like, my kids, and it's other people's kids have, you know, it always comes up, right? Like, there's always, like, I'd say for the most part, our district's done a great job. But, I know parents that have talked to, like, hey, could we include this type of music too? I mean, not recently, but, many years ago when my oldest one was younger, that's a thing, We're all work in progress. Like, we all grow, right, with our communities. And that's a really beautiful and good thing. And so, like, let's not set that backwards.
Thank you, Board Member Miller. Dr. Garrison?
Thank you. One of the things that I wanted to just bring mention to in this policy is that in the section where it says religious recruitment on school properties, no persons will be allowed to recruit students for religious purposes or organizations on school properties or at school-sponsored activities. That's a protection thing that we've always had in this that I've read in many policies, and that's kind of, again, it's a more of a protection space. We don't want to get into violating any students' rights, and that piece being strike through is something that I would think we would want to keep in the policy, as well as some of the thoughts that has been shared from the committee. I think the green section that's added, there's portions of this in the policy already. You know, one could argue that. I think if the will of the board is to just hear this thought, where in the green section where it says the Board of Education recognizes that churches and religious organizations are an integral part of a healthy community. And again, going back up to the Board of Education recognizes the principles of freedom of religion, of separation of church and state. Again, those two things seem very similar there, are integral part. We recognize that, and the school is flexible in trying to make accommodations in the second paragraph. I just think that we are, yes, the green section is something completely different, but it is also still felt in this policy that we currently have. And so the administration's recommendation is that we not make necessarily any changes to what we currently have. And if we did, take this green section and just put it at the top of the paragraph and keep everything else, because again, it's still saying all of the same things. I do understand Mrs. Miller's thought about the specifics around in the green section, churches. But again, from a open-ended perspective, again, this is kind of felt throughout the policy. And so with my final recommendation would be that we would, no matter what, keep that religious recruitment piece there if we can't have any compromises. The second part would be take this green section and just put it at the top of the paragraph, and everything pretty much remains the same, keeping everything that you've added, keeping everything that we have in place as well. I do agree with Mrs. Levy, though, where we can use better language, especially from where it says the school system will make every effort to be flexible in allowing individuals to observe religious holidays when there are holidays where they word conflict. I agree with you. We don't have to have the word conflict there. Where it's not on our calendar, we don't have to say the word conflict. So I just didn't, like I said, you know, the administration did have some time to review once this was sent to us, we did have time to review it. However, I know this is going to be a much broader discussion, and that is the administrator's position. Again, I will repeat, I would like to keep the recruitment of religious on school properties in this period. Secondly, if the board is willing, we can move this green section to the top paragraph and keep everything after that with the changes made to the holidays being a conflict, as Mrs. Levy stated. That'll be the administration's recommendation.
Thank you, Dr. Garrison. Any other discussion? Okay, I do have a question, Dr. Garrison, for you, and anybody else who has experience in this area. How many times have you had an organization try to recruit on school premises? Board Member Levy.
Thank you for that very specific question. I actually ran into it last year at the homecoming parade. There were people with pamphlets walking around saying, "Do you know Jesus? Do you know the Lord?" And I said, yes, I do, but this is not an appropriate discussion to have at the children's homecoming parade. I am uncomfortable, and you are not allowed to proselytize. And the response was, I'm on a city street. Yes, I can. Even though the police department had blocked off this area for the specific use of this school district to allow children, staff, and community to enjoy the homecoming parade. So I think I don't think the policy needs to be changed except to remove the word conflict, because I don't want anyone to believe that their religious holiday is in conflict with the school district's calendar. So yes, that's my personal experience.
Okay, so your example, so this was on a city street?
It was right outside of that window, actually, at a school event that had been sectioned off for the school district's specific use.
Okay, just curious, what was the outcome of that interchange?
The woman walked away from me, but continued into the crowd, which included students, staff members, and community members, and continued the proselytizing efforts.
Thank you for that
I have-
clarification.
Well,
Dr.
I've
Garrison?
also, sir, thank you. I've also had the experiences, mostly in the city, necessarily on school property at dismissal, especially in the high school. You sometimes see religious organizations, various different religious organizations, trying to pass out information. And no, it's not on school property. Sometimes it's off of school property, but it does present that conversation in which we sometimes have to ask people to move across the street and that type of thing. And so, I haven't experienced it in Beloit. However, I have experienced it in the city.
Okay, so the policy, as it was written before, did not keep this from happening, is what you're telling me.
Is that a
That's
question
correct.
to?
That's a question for both
Well, policies.
ladies first.
Oh, well, thank you so much. That was very kind of you. Policies are not superheroes that jump down in front of you and prevent things from happening, but policies explain your position. So when things happen, you can look to policy to say, no, don't do that, and this is why. This is our position on this action.
Okay. So, but again, the policy did not keep that from happening, correct? That's just a yes or no?
No, the policy is
Okay.
in place,
Okay.
and I just described what happened.
Thank you.
But I have a question for you. Is it your belief that policies prevent things from happening that are not in alignment with policy?
Trying to clarify, because this says religious recruitment on school property, and they weren't on school property. They were on a city street, which is not part of this policy. And secondly, Dr. Garrison, in your situation that you mentioned, was it on city streets also? And
Some of
not
the
on,
situations
and not
will
on
start
school
on
property?
property.
I'm sorry?
Sure, some of the situations will start on property, and then of course we would ask them to move across the street, and they would.
Okay,
I mean, that's the process.
Right.
That's the process in which we would come out and have that happen. So that's to answer your question.
okay, thank you. Do you have anything else, Board Member Hankins?
I'm just wondering if there's a compromise where we could meld the two thoughts together and maybe bring it back next time. I think everyone has excellent input into this. I don't want to throw a monkey in the wrench, but a monkey wrench into it. I think a compromise, I'm not going to suggest one because I don't have one, but the first, I think Dr. Garrison's idea of putting the green paragraph on top just makes it more wordy and confusing. I just think there's a better way to stay the flavor of what we're trying to, the spirit of what we're trying to say here. So I'm just wondering if we could kick it back and rewrite it, maybe if it's Brian and somebody from admin, to get the general spirit of what we're trying to say here and make everybody all inclusive and respect everyone's religious beliefs.
Thank you, Board Member Hankins. Well, let me assure everybody that this is not about excluding anybody. That is definitely not it. I believe in all, Board Member, I know you're in the audience, but Board Member Miller, I shared. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay, we will table for further discussion somewhere down the road. I've heard the board, or I've heard the committee. Thank you. Okay. The next meeting is Wednesday, December the 4th at 5:30 PM. And do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Thank you, Dr. Garrison.
Thank you all for your time.